Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 9 of our reading of Twilight Zone. Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 unforgettable explorations into the realm of the supernatural. And we're going to go over the copyright information, of course, first, because that is the most important stuff. Okay. Clearly says Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone is copyright by 1963 by Cayuga Productions. Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited is copyright 1964 by Cayuga. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Productions Incorporated. All rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books, distributed by Outlet Book Company, Incorporated, Random House Company, and it gives all the addresses there. The book was previously published in 2 separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Revisited, printed and bound in the United States of America. This gives all the Library of Congress information, and we are done with that. Now, in the last part, we finished with the Ghost Town Ghost, which was really, really fascinating. And now let's see. We are going to read Judgement Night, or get partway through it anyways. I don't know exactly how many pages it is, but it's to be pretty long. So yeah, it is going to take a couple a couple episodes to read it all. So anyways, here we go. Judgment Night. Silent, stealthily, sinister, the sea fog wrapped its all-pervading swirls around the slowly moving ship, blanketing it in an utter hush. At moments, those misty coils opened into rifts, allowing glimpses of the gliding vessel. Had there been eyes to see it, then the creeping ship was blanketed again, as if feeling its way through eternity. For the grip of the fog was not only nebulous, it was timeless. Rather than a solid motor ship of steel and substance, the craft could have been a figment of the fog itself. True, this was wartime, when caution often forced a skipper to adopt a ghostly style of navigation to dangerous waters, but for all that, this still could be a ship that never was and never would be, considering how the reluctant fog allowed so little of it to be seen. How little of it to be seen. Okay. A lone ship going on and on to nowhere. So it seemed to the tall, light-complexioned man who stood by the mist-dampened rail, running his long fingers through his blonde hair as he muttered his low, slow words, just as the ship was groping its way through the indeterminable. Okay. So was this man trying to draw some recollection from the past that would orient him to the present and enable him to gauge the future. Although only in his 30s, he had a worried air that was accentuated by the lines in his face and forehead. Though he looked like a seafaring man, he was definitely unfamiliar with everything around him. His colorless eyes were puzzled as he studied the open deck beyond a short row of cabins. He had trouble reading the name on the lifeboat hanging from its davits. Only the subdued throb of the ship's diesels struck a responsive chord in the man's nature, and that too was vague. He was repeating a name now, timing it to those pulsating motor beats. Curtis Lancer, Curtis Lancer, Curtis Lancer. The name was his. He knew it must be, for it was one thought that had come through to his groping mind, but it was only half right, like the peculiar thrum of the motor, which he recognized because it reminded him of a more familiar sound that he was unable to place. Curtis Lancer. The name would do because it would have to. It would have to do. He could read that other name now on one of the he could read the other name now, the one on the lifeboat. So he was Curtis Lancer on board the Queen of Glasgow, a plodding freighter working its way through the fog, a ship of about 5,000 tons, one day out of Liverpool, bound for New York. All that sprang to Lancer's mind in a sudden automatic way, and with it a short laugh came to his set lips. Lancer was alone, very much alone, in one sense, here on a strange ship, groping for a glimpse of something that he knew must lie ahead, but he wasn't so badly off. Certainly not worse off than the Queen of Glasgow. She was alone too, and in a really serious plight, for she was separated from her convoy. Lancer recognized that from the ship's reduced speed and the total lack of warning whistles from the enshrouded fog, or from the Queen of Glasgow herself. Lancer's first laugh had been guttural in tone and nervous. Now he laughed more lightly and was self-assured. He was finding his bearings well enough to chart a course better perhaps than this ship could. She had fog to deal with. He had only people. So far, Lancer had been avoiding his fellow passengers rather than have to find out something about him. That much he recognized now. He reasoned that if he did not know his own secret, he certainly could not betray it. Perhaps, on the contrary, he might learn something from those people that would enable him to grope his way back to the self that he had somehow lost. Those other people would be Lancer's convoy. By meeting them, he might return to sanity, just as the city of Glasgow was striving to find the other ships that she had lost, and thereby regain her safety. "I am Curtis Lancer." The words came crisply from Lancer's lips. "I am a passenger on the Queen of Glasgow, bound for New York. My cabin is..." He fumbled in the pocket of his jacket, brought out a key, and looked at it. "Number 28. If there are any questions that you would like to ask..." Lancer paused abruptly as a door opened, throwing a shaft of light onto the deck. A uniformed steward managed to close the door quickly to conform to blackout regulations. The steward saw Lancer looking at him, and made a slight bow. "They will be finished serving dinner soon," the steward said. You had best go in, sir, if you want to eat." The steward continued along the deck, and Lancer went inside as he scored a triumph without speaking a single word. Previously, he would have turned quickly to the rail to avoid meeting with the steward, or anyone else vaguely he could recall having done that up to this stage of the voyage. Now he had regained the nerve he had somehow lost, but he still was puzzled as to who he really was, why he was here on the ship, and most of all, what was the ominous thing that lay ahead, the secret that gnawed at his mind as relentlessly as the ship's steady throb. The ship's bell rang the time, and the sound had a familiar note that added to Lancer's new confidence. He recognized the companionway and went through to the ship's modest dining salon, a small room with a makeshift bar at the end and a half a dozen tables at the other. There were passengers sitting at the tables, talking in low, sustained tones. Most of them had finished dinner, and perhaps it was the smoke from the cigars and cigarettes that gave the room a hazy appearance that reminded Lancer of the fog. Like a figure from a dream, a man arose and shuffled across Lancer's path. From an indistinct blur, the man's face became a long, slightly drooping countenance with high-bridged nose and somewhat baldish forehead. He was probably in his late 40s, and his manner was friendly as he asked, "You are Curtis Lancer, aren't you?" "Yes." In the crisp tone he had used on oh, in the crisp tone that he had used on deck, Lancer added, "I am Curtis Lancer. I am Jerry Potter." Not to be confused with Harry Potter. Returned the baldish man. "We looked for you at dinner. We saw your name on the purser's list, and we were wondering what you looked like." He was ushering Lancer over to a table where some other passengers were seated, and Lancer accepted the chair that Potter offered. Introductions were in order, so Potter made them. There was Potter's wife, an attractive woman for her age, but with a forced, coy smile that marked her as a former showgirl, still trying to play the part. Next there was Major Devereaux, a broad and beefy of face, with his back and shoulders set as ramrod stiffness in the jacket of his British uniform. Brusquely, the major introduced Mrs. Devereaux, a gaunt, tired, gray-haired woman who did not smile at all. Finally, there was Barbara Stanley, a girl just out of her teens, who was doing her best to hide a nervousness that the others masked in more accomplished smiles. Like her hair, Barbara's eyes were a deep brown, and they showed a hopeful sparkle when she met Lancer's gaze. The girl seemed on the point of asking some questions, then she repressed her anxiety with a quick, almost apologetic smile. A steward was at Lancer's elbow, asking politely, "Will you have dinner, sir?" Lancer's response, "No, thank you," brought another query. "Would you like dessert, then?" To that, Lancer's tone became a bit petulant. No, I've told you I don't want any dessert." Lancer stopped abruptly and eyed the steward in a puzzled manner. Somehow the man and the situation were very familiar. "We've been through all this before," declared Lancer, pursing his lips in a level smile. It is your turn now to ask me, will I have some coffee? Then I can say yes, meaning that I would like some coffee." "I was just going to ask you that," said the steward hastily. "Your coffee will be coming right away, sir." To Lancer, all this was like an echo from the past. The other persons at the table failed to realize how serious Lancer was, so they smiled politely at what they thought was his idea of a joke. That broke the ice and gave Barbara the chance to ask, "Are you headed home, Mr. Lancer, or away from home?" That was the very question that Lancer had been asking himself out there in the fog. All this vague uncertainty, the blending of the familiar with the strange, could only end when he learned where he was really going and why. Home? The word jarred Lancer into a mental whirl, but he sensed that the girl was studying him, wondering why he didn't answer. That meant that the others must be wondering too. In this dilemma, Lancer heard his own lips mechanically voice what he suddenly knew was the truth. "I'm going away from home." Barbara's eyes were studying Lancer closely. Could she be guessing at the secret that Lancer was still going to uncover? Well, was still hoping to uncover. Did she know who he was and his reason for being here? Or was that pure sympathy that Lancer was and his own? Did she know who he was and his reason for being here? Or was that pure sympathy that Lancer saw in those dark, meditative eyes? While Lancer pondered such questions, turning them to the thrum of the ship's motor, his problem was shelved when Mrs. Devereaux commented, "We are going away from home too. The major is heading up to a military mission in Washington." That's where I'm bound for," Potters told Lancer. "Washington. I'm with the War Production Board. Mrs. Potter is going to Chicago. That's home for her. We've all become pretty well acquainted so far." Potter included the other passengers with a gesture. "Except for you, Mr. Lancer. So, naturally, we've been wondering about you." Lancer responded with a stiff bow. "I suppose I should feel complimented." "Yes, you should," rejoined Potter. "I'm good at sizing people up when I see them. That's part of my work, you see, and would say that you are a language professor, say from Oxford or some other English university." Potter's shot in the dark was helpful in stirring some of Lancer's recollections back to happier times before World War II, in which he felt that he must somehow be involved, yet in a puzzling way that he could not fathom. "Yes, I did teach languages," he answered slowly, "but not at Oxford." "Then where?" asked Potter. "Did you teach?" "In Frankfurt, Germany." "Frankfurt, Germany?" echoed Mrs. Potter, her tone tinged with horror. But what language did you teach there?" "English, for one." Oh, Mrs. Potter sighed. Mrs. Potter's sigh expressed the relief that Lancer was sure the others shared. "You were an exchange professor there?" "Yes, I could have been called that." The steward was returning with the coffee, and Lancer's thoughts, eased by his faint recollection of the past, became troubled again, in terms of the inescapable present. The steward's face, developing from a hazy outline, became so solidly fixed in Lancer's mind that it crowded his memory as well. "I've seen you before," declared Lancer, "but where?" "I wouldn't know, sir," rejoined the steward, "unless you've been traveling on this line before, only we don't get the same passengers often." From the shabby, neglected condition of the so-called dining salon, it was a wonder that the Queen of Glasgow ever carried passengers at all. But this was wartime, and people had to take the accommodations they could get in order to reach an appointed destination. Not only did Lancer recognize that fact, he knew that it applied in his case as much as the others. Besides, the steward's statement belied itself. His face was not the only one that Lancer found familiar. Those of the patrons seated at this table came into the same category. Lancer was sure that he had seen them all before, not just once, but often. And where else could he have seen them all except on this plodding freighter lost in the Atlantic fog? Eyes half shut, Lancer heard a buzz of voices. "Here comes Captain Willoughby." An image sprang to Lancer's mind. When he opened his eyes, he saw the living replica. A grizzled sea dog in his 60s, with narrowing coal-black eyes beneath bushy gray brows, a loose-fitting uniform that billowed appreciatively as he eased his broad bulk into the chair at the head of the table. All that was Captain Willoughby, exactly as Lancer knew he would be. His rumbling voice was part of Lancer's preconceived impression. "Sorry I couldn't make it for dinner," the captain said. "We have a miserable fog out there, so I had sandwiches set up in the bridge." That's kind of cool. He turned to the steward. "I have time for coffee now." It was Major Devereaux who queried in a casual tone. "Any chance of sighting the rest of the convoy, Captain?" "Not in this fog. In fact, there is no use to try. I've decided that we should go it on our own." Lancer listened with slightly tilted head, half closed closed his eyes as he commented, "Yes, I would say you are doing exactly that." Willoughby gave Lancer a sharp look and turned to the others. "I don't believe that I have met this gentleman," he said. "Allow me," put in Potter, "to introduce you hitherto, missing passenger Curtis Lancer, or perhaps I should say Professor Curtis Lancer." Willoughby acknowledged the introduction with a bow. "A keen ear you have, Mr. Lancer. I noticed the gradual speed up of the motors. You have A keen ear you have, Mr. Lancer, to notice the gradual speed up of the motors. You have had nautical experience?" "Yes, particularly with where motors are concerned." Again, Lancer was reverting to an earlier time, which was coming more clearly now. But he was unable to bridge the void between those days and the present. A few more inklings, and perhaps he would have it. Each statement that sprang to his lips so spontaneous was in itself a vital clue. Now the other passengers were noticing the increased throbbing in the motors. Mrs. Devereux tried to cover her nervousness with a quick query. "Wouldn't it be better to be with the convoy, Captain? What if a whole wolf pack should converge on us while we were all alone?" Captain Willoughby tried to brush off the question, but Lancer answered it. "No wolf packs would converge on a single ship, Mrs. Devereux." Lancer's tone was precise. "The principle of the submarine pack is based on the convoy attack." The rest stared at Lancer, and Captain Willoughby's narrowed eyes were sharpest of all. Then he stated calmly, "This gentleman is quite correct. Our chief danger would lie in the possibility of a single submarine picking up our trail." "That is good to know," said Major Devereux. "We certainly should stand a better chance against just one submarine than against 20. Still, it only takes one torpedo," argued Potter. "It's like a stab in the back being attacked by a submarine. I'd rather have them come after us with a pocket battleship. At least that's something you can see." "You will see the submarine," Lancer assured him, "because it will surface. They won't waste torpedoes on a freighter like this when they can shell us and sink us from a range of 1,000 meters." If ever a face turned suddenly grim, it was Captain Willoughby's. The old sea dog gave Lancer a steady look and said bluntly, "You talk like a U-boat commander, Mr. Lancer." Lancer set down his cup so forcefully that he broke it, saucer and all. Spilling the little coffee that was left, the steward instantly gathered the broken pieces and spread a napkin on the tablecloth. The talkative Mr. Potter promptly rallied to Lancer's cause. "Mr. Lancer knows Germany and its people," Potter exclaimed to Captain Willoughby. "He is an Oxford professor who taught at Heidelberg." No, interrupted Mr. Potter. "He didn't say Heidelberg. He said—" "I heard what Mr. Lancer said," snapped Potter, "and I knew him for an Oxford professor the moment that I saw him. The important thing is that he taught English wherever he was in Germany." Lancer ran his fingers through his hair again, his eyes taking on a distant stare. Perhaps he did look like a professor, but somehow he knew he wasn't. He was still groping for his real identity, just as the ship was laboring along its course, searching for safety. The faces about him, Lancer could recall seeing them so many times before. He had heard the same worried voices. He could even repeat their words before they were uttered. The steward was bringing a fresh cup of coffee, as he had so often done before. The motors were running at top speed, and soon they would reach the breaking point. With those throbs came a distant echo like something from another world. Lancer's world. Now Lancer had left the captain's table and was with Potter, who was introducing him to other passengers, all of whom seemed familiar, but oddly enough he could still hear the conversation of the persons he had just left, like a dream within a dream. "This Lancer," Major Devereux was saying, "I had him pegged for a Hun the moment he walked in. An Englishman teaching German German. My word, he's more like a German trying to talk English. Then why, asked Mrs. Devereaux, should he be traveling on this ship? I know why, exclaimed Mr. Potter. He's a spy. Laughter followed, and Potter turned around to see what it was all about. He described it. He decided that it was unimportant, and everyone seemed to be congratulating Mrs. Potter for some bright saying. Then Captain Willoughby closed the subject. I doubt that we could have a spy on board, Mrs. Potter, he told her. All our passengers have been well screened. However, I shall talk to Mr. Lancer later. The thought that brought an inward smile from Lancer, so the captain would talk to him later. Word for word, Lancer knew exactly what would be said, for somehow he had experienced all this before. With that thought, his elation faded. Then, as from a distance, he heard the soft voice that he had awaited. It came from the captain's table, saying, I am sure we do not have a spy among us, Captain Willoughby. Good night, all. It was the voice of Barbara Stanley. It struck the first chord of human sympathy that Lancer had so far felt. Here on the ship, where all were against him, yet where he knew that he must stay and fulfill some mission that he couldn't comprehend. We're going to pick that up when we get back. We've been reading from Judgement Night. It is part of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone collection. 26 unforgettable explorations into the realm of the supernatural, and it is adapted by Walter B. Gibson. Now, if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, for support me in any way, or if you want to join the Discord server, all the information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.